Hello, my most amazing artist, and welcome back to week 3 of our gratitude portraits. This week we are just going to be practicing different techniques of value. So we got cross-hatching, hatching, stippling, a finger blend, and scribbling. Okay, so our materials that we need today are pretty simple. We just need pencil, paper, and an eraser. Okay, so I'm just using normal copy paper, but if you have ruled notebook paper, that'll work too. And I'm just using a regular pencil. You can use mechanical pencil, whatever you have, and just an eraser in case I make a mistake, and actually erasers are really good to add highlights to. Okay, so if you watched our mini lesson, which you should have watched already, then you know all about the light source. Where the light hits an object, that's going to be the lightest part. That's where your highlight is going to go. If you accidentally make it too dark, then an eraser comes in handy because you can just erase it away. If you haven't already, by next week, we need to have drawn our final portrait. So we're going to add value to this portrait. Well, why is it so bright? We're going to add value to this portrait next time. So make sure you don't lose it and you still have it. And just as a reminder, I'm also going to be using this plate as a frame later on in the project. And this is found at Hobby Lobby. And you can get a pack of them, or you can find any old paper plate from any store if you think it would make a nice frame. Of course, I'll give you alternative material to that when the time comes, but just as a heads up, I will be using something like that later on in this project. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we are going to do is we're just going to draw some circles. Okay, so we are going to be stippling, cross-hatching, hatching, scribbling, and doing a finger blend. So we need 5 circles total. All right, I'm just gonna freehand these, but if you have something circular and you want to have perfect circles, then you can do that as well. Okay, make sure you space out your circles far enough apart from each other, because we are going to do that cast shadow for each of our circles. So we need to have room for that cast shadow. Make sure also that your circles are big enough, but not too big to where they take up the whole piece of paper. You still need to fit 5 circles, but they need to be big enough to where you can actually see the hatching or the cross hatching, whatever technique we are doing. Okay, and we're going to organize this, so I'm going to label them. I'll do the first one as hatching, then cross-hatching, and stippling, scribbling, and finger blend. All right, so now I know which technique is going to go in each circle. All right, for hatching, let's just start up here and go down. For hatching, it's simple. It's just lines, okay? So you're just gonna do short lines, and these lines go in the same direction, okay? So if your lines are going diagonal up towards the right, then all of your lines are going to do that, okay? Remember, up here on the top right hand of our circle, that is where our light source is coming from, okay? The light source is basically the source of our light. Where is the light coming? What direction is it coming from? And in this case, we're just going to say that our light source is coming from the top right hand corner of our circles. So that area is going to be the lightest part of our circles. Okay, that's going to be our highlight. Everywhere else is going to be darker. Okay, and usually if you look at a shadow, the farther away it is from the lighter part, it's going to be the darkest. So on the left hand side, the opposite side where our light source is, that is where it's going to be the darkest. And I'm just doing short diagonal lines all in the same direction. And these techniques are all about layering, okay? So you're gonna wanna go over these areas a few times with these lines, but as I get closer to my light source, the lightest part of my sphere, I am not pressing down as hard. I'm doing it very lightly, and my lines are actually getting shorter, okay? But down here, the farthest part of my sphere away from the light source, that's the darkest area. So I'm gonna press down harder, and I'm gonna layer more lines on down here, okay? your hatching should look like a bunch of different lines layered together. Do you see how it's darker over here, and as it gets closer to my light source, it's getting lighter? See how fast I'm doing this? It's because I'm not worried about making it perfect. This is practice. All right, so don't try to make it perfect. This is all about practicing so you get a feel for these different techniques, and you can find one that you like the best so you can use it in your portrait. All right, and now I can go in my eraser and erase where I circled the light source, and I can actually do some hatching with my eraser, just draw lines with my eraser, and that's going to blend those lines together and make it really bright up here. And you can always go back in. All right, when you're drawing and shading, it's all a back and forth. It's a back and forth from you're drawing, then you're erasing, then you're drawing, then you're erasing, okay? I'm pretty happy with that sphere. Now we're gonna do a cast shadow. It's just like an oval, it's not gonna be perfect, okay? I'm just drawing the basic shape of what the shadow of our sphere looks like, and we're gonna do some more hatching, okay? So my shadow is starting underneath where my sphere is, and it's gonna be the darkest right here, and then as I go out, away from the sphere, it's going to get lighter. And I'm still doing those short lines, and I'm doing it pretty fast, and I'm pulling up on my pencil as I get closer to the lighter area. All right, going back in, making some areas darker so I can really see that gradient, okay? Your value should not be harsh. It should be a nice gradient. Dark, kind of dark, a little bit lighter, and really light, okay? It shouldn't go from really, really dark like this, really dark, to all light, okay? There needs to be some sort of gradient. And to get that gradient, you have to keep layering and going back and forth, taking your eraser, making some areas lighter, okay? This practice now is going to be really important when we start adding shadows and highlights to our portrait, okay? So, cross-hatching. Basically the same as hatching, it's a bunch of lines, except for these lines, so you're gonna draw some lines, it's basically a bunch of X's, so they cross over each other. You see that? Just like that. Kind of looks like a fence, okay? So you draw some lines coming one direction, and then some more lines in the opposite direction, okay? And my light source is gonna be in the same place. That's where my light is coming from, so this is gonna be the lightest area of my sphere. And I'm just gonna layer these cross-hatching lines. So I'm just doing one direction, turning my pencil, coming in the other direction. In this area, the farthest away from my light source, that is gonna be darker, and as I get closer to my light source, I'm gonna not press down as hard with my lines so that they look lighter. Okay, remember, the harder that you press, the darker your lines are gonna get. See how I'm just layering these lines? It's a little messy, but you can tell the lighter areas from the darker areas, and that is the whole point, okay? If you don't have a gradient, you need to go back into your darker areas, make them darker, or use your eraser, make the lighter areas lighter, okay? Do the same for our cast shadow, just an oval underneath our sphere. Do some more cross-hatching lines. All right, stippling is really fun. It is a bunch of little dots, okay? So you're just gonna go in, and it takes a while, but you're just gonna do little dots, and I'm just poking my paper, not hard. I don't want to poke a hole through it. But down here, we know that's our darkest part is down there because our light source is going to be the top right. And I want to label it just to make sure that I know that's where my light is coming from. So this is going to be the lightest part. And with the stippling technique, it is, like I said, it's a bunch of dots, and the more dots that you layer together, like you more dots in one area, it's going to be darker. As your dots start to come closer to the light source, your dots are going to get farther apart, okay? So down here, my dots are going to be very close, and I'm just going to keep layering them. Notice I am not stabbing like because that makes really darker dots, and we don't want that. We want to go slow with this technique. If we're stabbing our paper like that and making our dots really dark, then up here our lightest area is not going to look very light, right? So we want to just do little dots gently. Do not stab your paper. Okay, I should not hear anybody doing that while they're stippling. Want this part to be the darkest, so I'm going to put the most dots down here, and as I get closer to my light source, there's going to be less dots. All right, that took a little while, and yes, your hand might start to hurt, your forearm might start to hurt, but just persevere and keep going because the end result of stippling is actually really beautiful, and it creates a really cool effect to any drawing. So stippling is probably one of my favorite ones, just the way that it looks. It is the most time-consuming one. But in the end, it's worth it because your drawing ends up looking really cool because you can see all those little individual dots, but the further you get away from it, it just looks like a shadow. So it's pretty cool. All right, now I'm going to do my cast shadow. Remember, right under where the sphere is, that's going to be darkest, and it's going to get lighter as it goes out. On to scribbling. Now, scribbling does not take long at all. It is literally just scribbles. So it's like loops, loop lines, and I'm just doing a bunch of circles. And just like up here, obviously, the more that you layer your scribbles, is it going to be lighter or darker? It is going to be lighter. Very good. Okay. Gonna mark my light source, top right corner, and as I get closer to my light source for my scribbling, I am barely pressing down. I might have pressed down a little bit too hard, so I'm gonna take my eraser because I want it to be the lightest up there, and I'm not gonna layer very many scribbles on top of one another. But down here, furthest away from the light source, I'm gonna layer those scribbles. Okay, and like I said, this is just a bunch of loops coming together, and the more that you layer, the darker it will be. Also, the harder that you press down, the darker it will be too. Okay, you don't want to do giant scribbles. These are pretty small, okay, because if you do giant ones, then it's all going to look the same color. All right, so they need to be pretty small. As I get closer to the light source, I'm lifting my pencil up so that it's really light up there, and I want it to be darker down here, so I'm going to do some more scribbles, but I'm going to press down harder so that it looks really dark down there. Now let me do my cast shadow. Draw a little oval right under my sphere. It's going to be the darkest, and as I get further away, I'm going to pick my pencil up. It's going to be lighter. All right, last but not least, the finger blend. And this one's pretty simple, and it is basically what it is called, finger blend. So this is a normal shading technique. So you're just going to go in and start coloring it in, kind of like how we did for our crystal clusters. We colored it using a color, and we're basically going to do that same thing. So I'm going to go ahead, let me find my light source right here. Don't want to forget about that. All I'm doing is very lightly, I'm going to color this circle in, okay? Doesn't matter if you can see where the lines start or stop. And of course, as I get closer to my light source, my pencil is going to come up and it's going to get lighter. Okay, now that I know where my light source is, I can erase that circle. Okay, it's just going to be lighter up here. There's probably not even going to be any pencil right where the light source is. And furthest away from the light source, I'm going to go in and I'm going to press down a little bit harder, okay, to get that shadow in there. And as I get closer, my pencil's going to just pull up a little bit, release a little bit of pressure that I'm pressing down when I get towards the light source. And as you're doing this, it is called the finger blend. So you can take your finger and you can actually, I like to do like little circular motions, but you can find what works for you. And it's a little bit hard to see right now, but my colors are slowly blending together. Not my colors, but my shadows are slowly blending together to create that gradient we are looking for, okay? And after you do one blend with your finger, it's probably a good idea to go back in, make it a little bit darker, okay? I really want to see that contrast in your practice between dark and light. This over here should be really dark, and up here should be really light. Everything in between is a gradient. Okay, a little bit darker. All right, so I added some more shadows. I'm gonna take my finger again and do my circular motions. I just feel like the circular motions make it blend a lot easier, but you can try it however you want to. Okay, and my light source has gotten covered up a little bit from my blending, so I'm gonna use my eraser and erase it, and I'm gonna take a clean finger and blend that harsh line from where my eraser just was. Okay, because we don't want any harsh lines. A finger blend, it looks very smooth, okay? So your goal with the finger blend is to get it as smooth as possible, okay? Whereas these look a little bit more, I don't know, rough, or they add more texture. Right, with the finger blend, it's very smooth. Shouldn't see very much texture, okay? So as you can see, I keep going back and forth, adding shadows with my pencil, erasing the lighter part, using a clean finger to blend it together. Okay, and I can see this part right here is a little bit darker than I want it to be because it's too much of a difference between where it's really light. So I'm just going to go in and try to blend that in by adding some more, lightly adding some more pencil on top. And just trying to blend that darker part in a little bit. Use my finger to blend it in. With the finger blend, your fingers are going to get a little bit dirty, but that is totally fine. So now I'm going to do my cast shadow for my finger blend. It's going to be darkest right underneath the sphere, and it's going to get lighter as it goes out. Alright, we're going to do this week. I just want you to practice these 5 different techniques. I really need to see the contrast between super dark and really light and a gradient right in between. Make sure you don't forget to put your light source each time so we know where the light is coming from. It's important to know where the light source is because we need to know where it's going to be the lightest on our object, okay? And the same goes next week whenever we add shading to our portrait. We're going to want to know where the lighter parts are so that we don't color them too dark. A common theme in all of these is that there's a lot of layering going on, okay? So we can't just see a little bit of layering. You need to go back in each of these and try to just build up those dots, build up those cross-hatching lines, the scribbling, the darker areas on the finger blend, okay? Take this opportunity to really practice these 5 different techniques so next week you are ready whenever we add value to our portraits, all right? I hope you guys have a lot of fun doing these different techniques, and I hope you learned something new today. I can't wait to see how your practice spheres turn out. I know they're gonna be amazing because you guys are amazing. All right, guys, I will see you next time. Bye.